Hi, everyone. Happy holidays. We're excited to be here with you, making probably the most festive beverage of all the beverages we know, eggnog, as you know.
Well, I think first of all, people always want to know how did this happen? How Carey Jones, we're writing books, we're making drinks. Like, how did we even do this? So, just to let you know how it started.
So, as Kathleen mentioned, my background is as a writer, and John's is as a mixologist. And the way we actually met is that I wrote about his cocktail program, which is always fun to bring up. The joke is that the cocktails were so good I married him. It's mostly a joke.
And I always tell people that the way we met was she reviewed me.
And fast forward 10 years, and here we are. So we've been writing about spirits together for close to 10 years now. We had a column on Food and Wine Magazine's website called Liquor Cabinet Roulette that was for the home bartender, which led to our first book, Be Your Own Bartender, in 2018. And now every cocktail has a twist. And what we really try to do in all of our recipes throughout the book, especially eggnog, as you'll see, is really gear it towards the way you make cocktails at home. There's some fabulous eggnog recipes out there that have, 5 different esoteric ingredients you've probably never heard of and extremely complex methods. And those are great. But we think that the way people actually want to make drinks is a lot more pared down, which is why, talk about our first drink.
Well, I want to talk about liquor cabinet roulette for a little bit, just to let people know more about our background and how we got here. What our column liquor cabinet roulette that we did, as Carey mentioned, for 7 years, what we did was we would take an ingredient that you heard about or you saw when you were at a bar or at a friend's house, something like, let's say, Campari or Saint Germain, which is an elderflower liqueur, and we would take that and then we would explore it and we would look into, okay, what is this product? Where does it come from? Carey would give you the history of the product, and then we would kind of put it through its paces, and we would make a drink very easy, like something it's called a highball, basically like the thing plus soda and ice in a tall glass. Or we would add some juice and some sugar to it, and then maybe we do something a little more advanced where we would add an egg, make an eggnog out of it. And we did that for 7 years. And out of doing that and all those articles is how we created our first book, Be Your Own Bartender. And then from there, continuing to do it is how we ended up at Every Cocktail Has a Twist. And the whole point of all of our work has always been, how do you make it at home? Like, when my mom has a party, what is she going to do? When my brother has a party, what is he going to do? Because my brother will drive 100 miles to buy the bottle of the thing, to make the thing. So we would just make these recipes, trying to make them for everybody and that you can get in any liquor store across the country.
And then, especially with our latest book, Every Cocktail Has a Twist, it's themed around 25 different drinks. And so, just as we'll do in this class, we teach you how to make the classic and then a whole bunch of ways to riff on it. And I think eggnog is the perfect example. So just to talk about eggnog a bit, historically, cocktails with whole eggs in them were actually quite popular and quite traditional. A lot of them date back to 17th century Britain, where you would have a pint of ale with an egg in it, which doesn't sound particularly appealing to me, but people drank it.
But when you couldn't drink the water,
so you're drinking,
you'd have ale with an egg in it to have breakfast.
So these days, it's a rarity to have a cocktail with a whole egg, but obviously everyone knows and loves eggnog. So there's several ways to make it in a big batch ahead of time, because you can buy it at the store. Most versions tend to be a little, I think gloppy is the best word. They're kind of thick. They're often reliant on corn syrup, and just kind of have this texture that's nowhere near as appealing as fresh homemade eggnog. So 2 ways to do homemade eggnog. One of them, when you read the directions, it kind of looks like a baking project. You separate the whites and the yolks, you whisk them separately, you add different ingredients. And
it's a lot of elbow work.
It's a lot of elbow work.
A lot of whisking.
And we do have a method for that.
And it's lovely.
And the texture is just light and dynamic. And then we thought, well, what if you just threw it all in a blender? And the result is actually awesome. It might not have, you know, the last little bit of ethereal, silky consistency, but it is so good. It is such an improvement on anything you can buy. And you make it in the blender.
The difference from separating the yolks and whisking each separately and putting in all that elbow grease to it and putting it in a blender is taking something fresh off the grill and eating it immediately, or letting it rest for a moment and then having it. So there is a difference, but the difference is, are you going to have it? It's immediate, or it's letting it rest. And we found that by letting it rest, it actually helps the flavors incorporate more into the eggnog itself. And especially if you're having a party and you're worried about appetizers. Did I light the candles? Did I turn on the front door light so people know my house is ready for people? It's doing it ahead of time really helps.
So let's pull out the blender.
All right. This is our Vitamix. It's our workhorse blender, but any blender will work. So to start this recipe, we start with the eggs. So we're going to add 4 whole eggs. I took them out of the refrigerator so that I wouldn't have to open the refrigerator and blind anybody. So it's 4 eggs that we're just going to crack right in.
And one thing we always do when making cocktails with either egg whites or whole eggs is we add them first. And the reason for that is, you know, once in a while you get a bad egg and you'll notice, you know, that the smell is off, the look is off. And what you don't want is to have all your other precious ingredients in there and then have to throw it all away. So taking a good look at the eggs is a great way to start.
We always tell people, because people ask us, is it safe to work with eggs? And the answer is, if it looks bad or smells bad, don't use it. Otherwise, the alcohol is gonna make everything fine, which is some people say that's a way to live. I'm saying, drink responsibly, but so we got 4 eggs in here. Set that aside. The next ingredient is we're going to put in 3 tablespoons of white sugar, just super fine white sugar. I measured it out, 3 tablespoons. And then I am going to open up the refrigerator, so watch your eyes. We're going to put in a whole cup of milk. Pre-measured it so I don't waste anybody's time. I'm going to set that aside. And then half a cup of heavy cream. So what is eggnog? Eggnog is eggs, milk, heavy cream, and the magic ingredient, nutmeg. So I have a 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg here that I add. It's just a 1/4 teaspoon. Nutmeg is a magic spice, and when people discovered it in Europe, they went crazy. And nutmeg is used so much in colonial cocktails, colonial era cocktails, and pre-prohibition cocktails. And without nutmeg, it's not eggnog.
We say that trying to make eggnog without nutmeg is almost like trying to make a pumpkin pie without the spices. There's just that sense, those flavors really lodge in your head, and it's what makes you realize you're drinking eggnog instead of just any old creamy drink. So in the whole blender, we can use pre-ground nutmeg. For garnish, which we'll get to in a little bit, you can use ground nutmeg, but we really recommend a whole clove and a microplane whenever possible. But I'm getting ahead of this.
So we've put all these ingredients together. The kind of sheet is we use 4 eggs. We're making 4 drinks, 4 to 6 drinks, depending on the size of the glassware you're using. So we'll put it on the blender. I will remember to put the top on. I have forgotten to put the top on before, and we all know that's a mess. So I've put the top on, turn on the blender, crank it up, and we're just gonna get it frothy. The idea is we get all the ingredients together, but we want froth because when we're hand whisking it, what we're also doing is we're aerating, we're frothing it, we're building up that head. So we want to make sure that we get a nice frothy head on the nutmeg. So you can go as long as your heart desires to get as much froth as you want.
But it doesn't need too long.
Yeah, doesn't need too long, but you know what? Let's froth it a little more. I like froth. Do you like froth, Carey?
I do.
Carey likes froth. I like froth. Do you like froth? Super froth.
One question we get asked a lot is about working with raw eggs. Is people a little nervous about the texture? Which is really understandable because the texture of raw eggs in themselves is not appealing. That's not something you want to encounter in a drink. And so the key is really just incorporating things thoroughly enough so that the egg yolk the egg yolk and white emulsify, get distributed throughout the drink. So you are not going to have any eggy bits in your drink, which no one wants, including us.
There's a lot of prohibition cocktails that use egg white, and people ask me, like, does it taste eggy? And it's like, no, the point is it adds a silkiness, it adds it adds body. With eggnog, we're using the egg whites, but we're also using the yolk, and the yolk is the flavor, the yolk is the, like, you know, that's the meal. You know, an egg white omelet doesn't taste the same as a regular omelet. A regular omelet, you feel that weight. All right, so for our first, we've made the base now. So now you can make your magic. You have made your eggnog. Your eggnog is here. It's ready to go. Now it's, do you want to just have some eggnog for, you know, the kids? Or do you want to spike it, and do a little holiday action?
And you're probably interested in spiking it up if you're at a cocktail session.
Exactly. So, probably here for the booze.
Probably here for the booze. So before we add the booze, it's important to chill this down thoroughly, just because it's best to serve eggnog without ice, and you don't want a lukewarm eggnog. So we're gonna do one of those magic television tricks and get out the eggnog we made before.
And one of the things when when I was mentioning before about doing it fresh, where you're all the elbow grease of whipping it, even then you want to refrigerate it to get it cold. Warm eggnog or even room temperature eggnog is not something I think anybody wants to experience. But at the same time, you want give that nutmeg a chance to incorporate itself into the nog. So now that we've had our chilled eggnog that has still, after it's been resting, still has a frothy head to it, which is important.
Yeah, and this was made 4 or 5 hours ago.
One of the things we also like to do, since eggnog isn't a drink that you put ice into, but you want it to be chilled, is we chill the glasses ahead of time. So I took them out of the fridge so that, you know, give the glass the chance to hold that cold. Ooh, hold the cold. That's a good phrase. I'm going to hold on to hold the cold. But what we're going to do is, since we have our nog here, easiest thing to do is put your booze in the glass, then pour the eggnog over it, and then garnish it, and you are good to go. So for our first one, we're going to do the classic. We're going to do a little bourbon. One of my favorite bourbons. I think Carey likes it too, but it's definitely my favorite.
It is your personal favorite.
My personal favorite is Old Forester. My runner-up favorite is, where'd I put it? Oh, is Evan Williams. These are my guys right here. This is a little more, this is a little less, but here's the key. Neither one are expensive, especially this one. There's no reason to break the bank on bourbon. Bourbon is not supposed to be crazy expensive. When you're spending all that money on bourbon, you're paying for fancy glassware. You want in your bourbon, personally, I want a high rye in my mash bill, and I want it to be 86 proof. Maker's Mark goes even higher, but Old Forester, they've been making it for a long time. Evan Williams, they've been making it for a long time. They just know what they're doing.
And so the fun thing about eggnog is you do most of the work in advance. And then really you can spike it however you want. So we're starting with bourbon because that's the most traditional. Also right here, you could use a dark rum if that's something you prefer. You could use an aged brandy. You could use a little of each. We'll get to the million variations we have in the book later. I think one year you were making it with scotch and dark rum.
Triple split.
And bourbon.
I did it with scotch,
Those were
rum, and bourbon. So
Yeah.
it was 3 ounces of booze with the eggnog, and there's so much flavor. And woo, you had, well, I had more than one, but I recommend it to most people if you're driving, have one and then have a cheeseburger. Right here, I have an ounce and a half of bourbon. A lot of recipes will call for an ounce of your liquor, which is fine. I find that when you use just 1 ounce, you don't taste it.
It can get a little lost. The thing about eggnog is the flavors inherent in the base, the cream, the sugar, the milk, they're big flavors. They're heavy flavors. It's like eating melted ice cream. And booze can kind of hide in there. So we're kind of trying to strike the balance between tasting the spirit, because bourbon's tasty, and not overwhelming it. So we find that 1.5 ounces is the sweet spot. You could certainly tone it down. You could punch it up a little. Some cocktails don't take very well to that, but eggnog really is one where you can kind of choose your own path.
So we've got our booze in the glass. So I'm going to put in what we recommend is for 1.5 ounces of your liquor product is 3 ounces of the nog base that you made.
And just for reference, a blenderful like we just made will make about 6 drinks. You can certainly double it depending on the capacity of your blender. As you've seen, it's a pretty simple process. So if you need to make multiple batches, they can just hang out in the fridge.
And one of the things you can do is you can put it all in the blender, blend it up, and then add in all the booze, and then give it a quick little blend to incorporate it all, and boom, your eggnog is set, ready to go. You can just pour it out.
All right, so here we have the bourbon spiked eggnog. Going to give it a quick little stir.
And then because we did the pre-batch, I have some froth here, so I'm going to just ladle out some froth on top. And when you make the blender version, like if you did it ahead of time and put the booze in ahead of time, you would just like give it a quick little shake to make sure you're still frothy, add a little bit. And then because nutmeg is just the greatest ingredient, little microplane, little whole nutmeg, and we'll just put a little fresh nutmeg on top over the drink. And it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I wish you could see this. I'm looking down on it. It's amazing.
So here we go. Here's our first eggnog. Cheers.
Cheers.
After you.
Cheers. That nutmeg.
So I can smell the nutmeg from over here. And one real reason to do
So good.
as good as you remember.
Oh, it's so good. Yay, it's Christmas time.
One reason to do the garnish with whole nutmeg rather than the pre-ground nutmeg is you get these aromatics that are released as soon as you grate it. If you think about zesting an orange, for example, how all those aromatic oils get released and it just smells amazing. A similar thing happens to whole nutmeg when you grate it. And the aroma is just so much of our perception of a cocktail that I mean, it smells like Christmas. To me, this just smells like Christmas because of that eggnog association. We are going to take a pause right here and see if anyone has questions. You can pop them in the chat box.
Yeah, what do y'all think? Let us know. Let's talk about it.
Okay, first question. Can you make this successfully if you only have a hand mixer? Yeah. I don't see why not. Absolutely. Sure. I think it's just a matter of getting everything fully incorporated. So depending on your kind of mixer, you might want to kind of scrape the outsides of the bowl to make sure everything gets back in the middle. But the important thing is just that everything's agitated and combined.
It's about speed and aeration, because you need to be able to make a froth. If it needs to be not only just be incorporated, but it's got to get frothy. So if you can get that speed and that frothiness and that aeration, then I think you'd be okay.
Yeah, I think so too. One more question is, where can you source whole nutmeg? Fancy spice stores or fancy grocery stores. I think our standard Safeway has it.
Yeah, I've got this nutmeg I have is from Safeway. I've also gotten it from what's the one? I used to have a card for it in the Northeast, and I don't know where I put it. I've gotten it at Kroger. I've gotten it at Publix.
And it'll just be with the other spices in that standard jar. They're usually what, 8 to 10 nutmeg pods in a thing. Yeah, here we go. And it'll last you. I mean, we make a lot of eggnog, and I don't think we go through even one pod in a season.
Good thing about the nutmeg is it's a whole seed, so it's not like oregano that is going to fade over time. This is, I don't even know when I bought this. I bought it so long ago. Because I mean, how long? That's a lot of nutmeg.
It's a lot of eggnog, is what it is.
But once you start grating it, it's fresh because it's just a nut. Eggnog will last you a long time, and you can get it. If you go to the spice section in your local grocery store, they will have it. If they don't have it, I would go to the manager and ask, why don't you have nutmeg? It's a staple. It's Christmas time, for Pete's sake. You don't have nutmeg? I got people coming over.
There's another question I see. What are the lower calorie? Do you see that? What are the lower calorie, lower fat substitutes that still keep the rich flavor?
We have in this lovely cocktail book.
We have a great recipe called Skinny Nog, which is sort of tongue in cheek, but sort of not.
You may have heard of a drink called a Skinny Girl Margarita that was a big fad. So we thought to ourselves, oh, we should make a skinny eggnog.
Yeah. So what we do in that, non-fat milk would be hopeless. You do need a little bit of fat to hold all those ingredients together. So we use 2% milk, just a little bit of half and half, an egg white instead of a whole egg. And then vodka is the spirit we use to spike it. So it has this really kind of refreshing, clean flavor. And then again, the nutmeg is absolutely key.
If you don't have nutmeg, it's not eggnog.
It's just going to taste like, vodka milk.
Yeah, if there's one takeaway from this evening, it's that without nutmeg, it's not eggnog.
Yeah. All right. These are such great questions. Thanks, guys. What is the proper glassware to use for eggnog? Fun thing about eggnog is you can kind of do whatever you want. We would recommend, in terms of size, we would recommend something like a rocks glass, mostly because if you do a much bigger glass, either you're going to get a lot of booze all at once, or it's going to start warming up as you drink. Yeah. So if you have big, fun, festive glasses, have at it. But something about this size, you'll probably drink it while it's still cold.
I think the one thing to avoid is tall glasses, like Collins glasses, glasses that look like this. Make sure you can see it, is not good for eggnog. You want a short glass, but you can use, a red wine glass and just fill it up, just as much as you would pour for a red wine pour.
Yeah, you could, couldn't you?
The point,
these are punch glasses.
Yeah, these are our punch glasses that we love. That's the punch bowl right there, upside down so it doesn't get dust on it, because there's only so many times you take out the punch bowl. But definitely short glasses. And we also recommend putting the glasses in the fridge or even the freezer so that when you pull them out, they are frosty, because you're not going to add any more cold ingredients. There's no ice for nutmeg, or for eggnog, excuse me. So making the glasses cold ahead of time definitely helps. Because the thing you don't think about is when you're holding a glass, the heat from your hand transfers to the glass and heats up the glass.
And definitely don't get a glass fresh out of the dishwasher and put eggnog in it.
No, never.
That'll make a big difference.
In fact, never take a glass fresh out of the dishwasher and put anything in it. Let it cool down.
These are such great questions. We have a question: how long does it last in the fridge? That is a whole topic we can get into.
Ding, ding, ding. Good question.
The short answer is eggnog without the alcohol. I'd say about a week, kind of the same length of time you'd keep other dairy products.
Yeah. How long are you going to keep your milk, basically?
The longer answer is once you add the alcohol, it essentially lasts forever. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but
It's crazy.
People age
It's
eggnog
science.
for weeks, they age it for months, they age it for years. I didn't believe it the first time I heard it, and I think it can sound a little icky, but what happens is if the alcohol content is high enough to kill off bacteria, then all the bacteria we're afraid of in perishable dairy,
All those
don't
egg
go.
issues go away.
So we made eggnog in July one year. We drank at Christmas. Some people swear by even older eggnog. I have to admit, I get a little weirded out after a couple of years.
You can go to some fancy cocktail bars and they'll be very excited to tell you they've been aging this eggnog for years. And you're going to be like, what? When we wrote this book, we made the eggnog in July.
That's
and
true.
we served that eggnog
At Christmas.
last year. And it was fantastic. And it tasted different because all that time, that aging, the flavors just incorporated. I mean, I don't know scientifically what happened. It's, I just know maceration is a thing, and it just aged. It got more subtle. It got more nuanced, and it tastes fabulous. And what we did was we took it out of the fridge, put it in the blender, zipped it to remake the froth, and then just poured it, and it was fantastic. And that was, 5 months of aging, and it was awesome.
It was so good. Let's see. I think let's move along to another recipe. We can take more questions at the end.
Yeah.
But let's see. So now you've made your eggnog base. We've talked about how it's really easy just to pour bourbon in it. There are also so many things you can do. So one that we think is really, really fun for the holidays, we call Run Run Rudolph. It's a cross between an Irish coffee and an eggnog. So what that means is we have some Irish whiskey here and then coffee liqueur, and we just spike the eggnog with the two of those, and you get the rich flavors of the whiskey, you get that little hit of coffee. Our joke is that this is what Santa really wants when he stops at your house. He doesn't really want a glass of milk. He probably wants one of these.
Give him a nip of whiskey and a little caffeine because he's got a lot of work to do.
He's got a busy night.
We came upon this drink by thinking about, okay, so in colonial times, you added eggs to all the drinks, as we mentioned before. You couldn't drink the water, and it's how you could have breakfast. They had these drinks called eye openers, fog cutters, because apparently everybody drank all day. You hear about like Ben Franklin was like, how many alcoholic ciders did he have with breakfast? So every morning you kind of needed to get the motor started. So put a little egg with your booze. So it's like, all right, so eggnog, if you put eggs in, then it's eggnog. Well, what's another great eye opener classic today? And that's an Irish coffee. And then we thought, oh my God, what if you make an Irish coffee eggnog?
Well, the answer is it's really delicious.
It's so good.
There are a lot of great coffee liqueurs out there. The most familiar one is Kahlua, which is really tasty. And also really, it's on the sweeter side. It's rum based, so that'll be great in this. But our preferred product is made in Australia. It's called Mr. Black, and it just has this awesome, really concentrated coffee flavor. And they call it a cold brew liqueur rather than a coffee liqueur. And I think that kind of says a lot about its taste. It tastes like coffee, and the intensity, especially in an eggnog, you're going to taste the coffee. Sometimes some coffee liqueurs can be a little weak. And so you want to make sure you're tasting the coffee, that it comes through the drink. So we found that Mr. Black's as a cold brew liqueur really imparts coffee flavor when it's around, it's inside all of this nog. We have a comment that Mr. Black rocks, which it does. Okay. Whoever said that, do you work for Mr. Black's? I'm just wondering. Do you need to say add? Okay, so we do Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey, there's a lot. I don't know if you noticed, my last name's McCarthy. You drink a lot of Irish whiskey. I was raised very Irish. We raise our children very Irish. Tullamore Dew is got to be my hands down best cocktail Irish whiskey. I love all the Irish whiskeys, but the price point is fabulous. It's triple distilled. It is fabulous, but it has weight to it. Some Irish whiskeys can be thinner, which is fine. Jameson, I love a shot of Jameson. Don't get
me wrong, I love it. But for cocktails, it kind of like doesn't hold anything. Whereas Tullamore Dew has this weight to it so that you can build cocktails on top of it, which is why I love it. Also, the price is perfect when you're running a bar or making drinks at home.
And when John talks about the weight, it's especially true in a drink like eggnog, where there's so many, where the flavors of the eggnog itself are really bold and really rich. You don't want it to get lost. And a spirit that's slightly thinner could get lost in there.
So we're going to add an ounce of Irish whiskey. And I know you said before, I know you're thinking, well, didn't you with the bourbon say you need 1.5 ounces to cut through? Well, we're going to add the Mr. Black. So we're going to start with 1 ounce of the Irish whiskey. Just going to pour it right into the glass. And this is single serve. Again, as we said before, you can do all this in the blender and just pour it out. And then we're going to add that 1/2 ounce of the Mr. Blacks. So 1.5 ounces. And do the same 3 ounce of the nog. So our template is 1.5 ounces of booze product to 3 ounces of nog. So I'm going to do a little 1/2 ounce. I have my jiggers here that tell me when I'm pouring. Feel free to use, I also have, these kind of little 2-ounce measuring cups. You can also, I'm sure my friend who loves Mr. Blacks, you can just, just pour as you want, as much as you want.
Yeah, just Mr. Blacks in it would be pretty tasty too.
Just do it.
No reason not to do that.
So we have our 1.5 ounces. And then we're just going to add our 3 ounces of our nog.
These are looking good, I gotta say.
I know. Honestly, I'm ready to drink this one myself.
You're allowed. And let's see, we had a great question in the chat while we're mixing, asking about the difference between bourbon and whiskey. That's a great question. Whiskey is a broader category. Whiskey is essentially a spirit that's distilled from grain and then aged in a barrel. So you'll have Scotch whiskey, you'll have Irish whiskey like we have here. Rye is a whiskey. And so all of those fall within that broader umbrella. Bourbon has a lot of criteria. They're all registered with the US government if you want to call it bourbon. It needs to be, so the base of grain that a whiskey is made with is called the mash bill. The mash bill has to be at least half corn to be bourbon. It has to be aged in a new charred oak, and it has to be aged for at least 2 years. Most bourbons age longer than that. And it has to be made in America. Most is made in Kentucky, but not all. And so bourbon is a very American subset of whiskey. Bourbon
used to only be allowed to be bourbon. It had to be made in Kentucky. And so a few years ago, they changed that law. So to be called bourbon doesn't have to be just in Kentucky anymore. It just has to follow the rules of how it's aged. Some people may say if it's not in Kentucky, it's not the same because there's a reason why they have bluegrass. Right, the ground, the water gets filtered differently there. I'm not going to say that I only prefer bourbon from Kentucky. I will say that my 2 favorite bourbons
are made in Kentucky.
Are from Kentucky, but I've had a lot of really good bourbon not from Kentucky.
But that's a great question. All right,
so this is delicious. This is our Run Rudolph. I don't know if you noticed, but I put some more froth on top, and I grated some fresh nutmeg. I highly recommend, even if you're making it by the pitcher, you've spinned it all up, you've poured it out. If you get a microplane, and I love this one by the way, and your nutmeg and do fresh grated nutmeg on top, it's a game changer. Make one without it and make one with it and taste the two, and you're just going to be like, oh my God, because the drink is going to start before you even taste it, because all that nutmeg is going to come at your nose and you're going to think Santa.
It's a really good drink. All right, so we've talked about.
I'm ready. I taste some coffee. I got some Irish whiskey. I got some eggnog. I'm ready to go.
Got your energy back? So we've talked about how to make a big batch of eggnog for a party, a couple of ways to spike it up. We have about 8 more ways in the book. We have berry liqueurs, we have scotch, we have one with dark rum and banana liqueur that tastes like a bananas foster dessert. It's amazing.
It's so good.
It's so good. Sometimes you just want to make an eggnog for yourself. And there's actually a great way to do that in a cocktail shaker. If John were making eggnog for someone at a bar and they didn't have it ready to go, this is how he would do it. We had one Christmas where he was just making everyone eggnog before we figured out the blender method. But it's a great way to talk about shaking cocktails in general and working with eggs in cocktails in general.
Historically, when you ordered a cocktail, that was a specific drink. That was booze, some kind of sugar, some kind of bitters, and a citrus peel, and water. That drink became the old fashioned, because people would say, make me a cocktail the old fashioned way. Because this is, cocktails are very much an American thing. Much like America, it's grabbing all these different things and bringing them together. There were so many different drinks. There were crustas, there were juleps, mint julep. There are all these different types of drinks. And there was one style of drink called a flip. And a flip is anything with a whole egg in it. In Prohibition times, what was really popular was a sherry flip. You would take your Amontillado and you would crack a whole egg in it, and you might take a hot poker from the fireplace and jam it in and make it froth up, and there you go.
I love sherry, and that still doesn't sound
I know, she really loves sherry. She taught me to love sherry. I love sherry. Sherry is amazing in cocktails, by the way. It adds nuanced flavor. We use it a lot in the book.
But eggnog.
But eggnog, sorry, tangent. But the point being that a flip is making a cocktail and adding an egg. So we thought, oh, you could just make a single serve eggnog. So again, as Carey said, we start with the egg. Whenever you're making a cocktail, and when I'm training younger bartenders, I always say start with the egg, because especially if you're trying to separate the egg yolk from the egg white, you don't want to fill it up with everything and then do this and then mess it up. So we always start with the egg to make sure, well, that looks like a good egg to me. Smells good, looks good, going to use it. And then we're going to start adding in our ingredients. So for this single serve, because we love bourbon, we're going to use our Old Forester again. We're going to put in 2 ounces. So this is one large egg, the whole egg. And now I'm going to put in 2 ounces of bourbon. So this is more than we've been doing, because this is a single serve cocktail. So I want to make sure you're getting your drink. You're getting your drink in, as we say, or your drink on, as they say.
And we did have a question in the chat about what size egg to use. A large egg is our standard measurement. It's sometimes wild when you go to the grocery store and you see how big the jumbo eggs can be.
Yeah.
So one large egg is what we use.
And I don't even know the last time I saw a box of medium eggs at this point, but you get large, you get extra large, you get jumbo, but large is what you want. Normally a large egg, if you're separating it, is going to give you about an ounce of egg white. Again, we're making eggnog, so it's the whole egg, so we have the yolk involved as well. So now we're going to add, I made these ahead of time so that I could do this easy. So
we got your half and half.
I got the egg, I got the bourbon, I got an ounce of half and half. So what's half and half? Half and half, it's milk and heavy cream. So instead of with the other with eggnogs, we're putting in milk, we're putting in heavy cream. Make it single serve. Let's cut to the chase and just use half and half. So we put an ounce, half and half in there. And then we got half sugar.
So when we use the blender, we were able to put just white sugar in there because the blender is so powerful, it'll churn everything up. In making cocktails in a shaker, generally, you don't want to use granulated sugar. What you do want to use is called simple syrup, which is just equal parts white sugar and water. And the idea is you have the water a little heated, you stir them until they dissolve. And that way the sugar fully integrates with the cocktail. You're adding a liquid to other liquids that's already been dissolved. Whereas if you use granulated sugar in a cocktail shaker, you can end up with something feeling a little gritty or the sugar sinks to the bottom. We don't want that. We want everything completely blended. All right, getting your magic ice scoop. All right, I will take the liberty of adding the simple syrup.
Yes, I have my magic tool bag here.
Bartender bag. All right, so we got egg, bourbon, half and half, simple syrup.
All right.
And now it's time to shake.
That's eggnog. We do need to add the nutmeg. But the nutmeg we're going to add at the end on top, and it's going to do it all for us, because to put in the amount of nutmeg for a single serve, even a pinch will be too much, because nutmeg goes a long way. So when you're making cocktails and shaking with eggs or egg white, you need to aerate it. It's that whole elbow whisk, 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 whisk. So a cheat is, this is called a Hawthorne strainer. It's the strainer you've seen all the time. You put it over the top, it holds back the ice, and you pour. And it has this wire coil in it that comes out that holds back ice and stuff. But it occurred to us that it's kind of like a whisk, isn't it? So if we drop it into the shaker, put everything in it, as we shake it, it's going to give us so much more aeration, so much more whip. And I think, as Carey mentioned, we do a what's called a dry shake, which is all the ingredients, no ice. And we shake, shake, shake. And the thing about shaking, we always tell people, everybody has their own shake. Everybody has their own walk. Everybody has their own way to dance. The key to shaking is to commit. You got to go for it. You got to do it like you're a rock star. You got to go shake, 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 shake. I always tell people, bend your knees, take a breath, and then shake it, shake it.
Because you're really, I mean, you're imbuing the cocktail with life, not to get too mystical about eggnog, but that's where you're adding the energy. That's where you're adding the.
One time we were at a bar and I heard somebody shaking a drink, and I said to Carey, I was like, I don't want that drink. She's like, what are you talking about? I was like, they're not shaking it. They're just kind of moving it around a little bit. I don't want that drink. That's bad. That's bad juju in that drink. She was like, you're crazy. But then I made it for her, and she's like, okay, you're still crazy, but I might agree. I think you said you might agree with me.
Yeah. So when using eggs, this also applies to egg whites that you might use in different historic cocktails. What we do is called the dry shake and the wet shake. So the first thing you do, as John just did, is you shake all those ingredients together without ice. And what that does is really give them a chance to incorporate, emulsify, and John's little tip of the spring in there gets it even more, kind of contributes to that mixing even more. But after that, you have to chill it down too. So then you add the ice and give it another shake. And what that does is prevent the ice from diluting too much. You want the ice to dilute a bit to help chill down the drink, but you don't want it to do too much. So first shake without ice, then shake with ice.
And the one difference between the blender method or the elbow grease method and the single serve method is we are adding another ingredient, which is water. So this is going to be lighter than the other eggnogs, which is also kind of an interesting part about it, because we are not just aerating it, but now to cool it down, we're going to shake it with ice. So usually when you shake a cocktail or stir a cocktail, you're going to add about an ounce of water.
Just through the ice melting.
Just through the ice melting. So it makes a lighter eggnog, which is pretty good. Now, again, I'm going to bend my knees.
And now there's the ice in it, so you'll really hear it.
I'm going to loosen up.
Get into it.
And then I'm going to shake it, shake it. That's what you want to hear. You don't want to hear this. I don't want that drink. I can take my little foil out. I'm going to put it back on my Hawthorne strainer. Behind the bar, I have several of these, so I just have them ready to go, but just put it back in, ready to go. Then I'm going to take my glass.
Which again is chilled. We are huge proponents of chilling glassware. especially for cocktails like this.
We got a fancy antique glass one for this particular cocktail, eggnog. And I'm just going to pour it in.
A beautiful drink.
It's got some froth on it. I realized that maybe I needed a GoPro to have there as well, so you could see what I was doing. Now we'll add the fresh nutmeg, because that, again, we didn't put it in it, but we're going to put it on top, and so we're going to go heavy.
Someone asked if you could use allspice instead of nutmeg.
You can, but it's not the same.
I would agree. You could also use allspice in it and nutmeg on top. There's an amazing ingredient called allspice dram that could be delicious in eggnog. But there's something about eggnog that is just so closely associated with nutmeg. If you ever buy eggnog in the store, it absolutely has nutmeg in it. So I'm sure allspice would be delicious, but the kind of eggnogginess of eggnog really does require nutmeg.
You will, if you have eggnog that doesn't have nutmeg in it, you'll think to yourself, this doesn't taste like eggnog. Now, I love allspice. We love allspice. We use it all the time. And as Carey said, there are allspice liqueurs. So putting an allspice liqueur into a nutmeg, into an eggnog. I'm all about the nutmeg. Putting an allspice liqueur into an eggnog and having nutmeg, that sounds good. Oh, I get to taste it?
You made yourself a cocktail.
Mm.
All right, so that's the single serve eggnog. If you're just making it for yourself and you want a nice drink to sit by the fire with, that's one that's worth the time.
And I was behind the bar for
a lot of years. Don't need to say how many years.
I know.
A lot of years.
It's going to make me sound older. So when I needed to make, if we weren't doing an eggnog on the cocktail list, but somebody was like, "Oh, it's Christmas time. Can you make me an eggnog?" This is what I would make them. And it's a single serve. It's easy to make. It's quick. It is definitely, it's a lighter eggnog. We were talking earlier about the skinny eggnog. It still has all the calories in it, but it feels a little thinner because of the ice, because of the water. So all the same amount of booze is in it. It just goes down quicker. So it's definitely drink responsibly, I think, is the key.
How's your eggnog?
So good. The key, again, nutmeg.
Let's see. So we're gonna move to questions now. These are our drinks. We got 3 nogs right here. And you guys have been putting some great questions in the chat, so thank you. Can you talk about your top essential 3 to 4 bartending tools you can't live without? We just used a lot of them.
Used a lot of them. Gotta have jiggers.
So a jigger is just by far the most efficient way to measure spirits in a cocktail. And the reason for that is it gives you the increments that you want. You certainly could do a lot of, so cocktail recipes are generally written in ounces. And you could do the math, convert that to tablespoons and kind of pour liquids in a tablespoon, but it just gets kind of cumbersome and messy. So a jigger, I mean, they look great. They're very inexpensive. And then one alternative that we find works great at home is these sort of small graduated measuring cups.
Yes. These guys are great.
Those guys, because they list the ounces.
You'll see these a lot in bars these days. We did an event recently where they didn't have jiggers behind their bar. I was making drinks behind their bar, and they had these. These are 2 ounces, so 1/4 ounce up to 2 ounces. The key is you want to have something that you can measure 1/4 ounce with.
Which is sort of the smallest standard measurement cocktails.
I love these because I can hold them in my hand. I can move them around. I can do. This works better for me because I was busy behind the bar. Whereas this is like a 1/2 ounce, but then there's a line there that gives you a 1/4 ounce. So the most important thing is that you need to have a measuring vessel that can go down as low as a 1/4 ounce.
We often compare cocktail making to baking in that the ingredients aren't necessarily complicated, but you do have to be reasonably precise. And so that's why we really recommend having a good set of jiggers, because you don't want to eyeball a quarter ounce, because just getting the wrong amount can really mess up the balance of the drink.
And that's really important when it comes to sweeteners. We always tell people that, you know, when you add sugar to a drink, it's not to make things sweet. Sugar is a binding agent. It's like adding, like Carey, you say it's like salt for cookies. You need that little bit of sweetener to bind all the drinks. We'll be developing a recipe and it's not working. It's like something's off. And then we add a quarter ounce of some kind of sweetener, maple syrup, agave, sugar, raw sugar. And then all of a sudden the drink just comes alive and you taste all the flavors. You don't taste any sweetness. You just taste all the flavors because that little bit of quarter ounce of sugar will bring the whole drink together.
And what's funny is that's true for basically every cocktail except eggnog, which you do want to be a little sweet because of the dessert. But in bartending in general, we don't make our cocktails sweet.
What she said.
Yeah. Number 2 essential tool, shaking tins like John has here. Here's your other tin. There are all kinds of cocktail shakers. You've probably seen some of them out there. Some have the screw caps. Some are a glass vessel and then a metal top. These guys are inexpensive, indestructible, and just what we're used to working with.
And they can also be very expensive. It depends on what you want to do. But when I'm buying them for a bar program, they're inexpensive. And there's also, you've seen the ones with the pint glass on top. That's called a Boston shaker, which is completely valid. The only difference is you're making an airtight seal that you have to break. And I found that trying to do that when you're busy behind a bar, having glass, trying to undo it just slowed you down. There are a lot of bartenders out there, especially in Boston. I won't name some bars that, have a name that might look like this, that were infuriated with me that I did not use Boston shakers when I was at their bar. But I do like personally the 2 tins. Technically, I call this the big one and this the little one. You can just squeeze them to be able to break the seal. They're safe. You don't drop it. It doesn't shatter.
And then the third essential tool would be
a Hawthorne strainer.
And so it just fits perfectly on the top. And what you're doing here is you're straining out the drink and holding back the ice. And so if you have those 3 things, you can make most drinks and a bar spoon.
Well,
like we started.
Now you said what's essential. It's like, well, what can I not live without? You do need a bar spoon because sometimes you need to mix a drink. And when it comes to mixing glasses, you can use. Mixing glasses are beautiful. You can use them. You can mix a drink in a tin, no problem, which I've also done, especially during recipe development, because it's a lot quicker to clean this than a big fancy mixing glass. But mixing glasses are sexy. And I love them, and we have many. We have many. Every time we go antiquing, Carey says, we're not going to buy any more glassware.
We also live in earthquake country, and we have a toddler, and there's so much glassware, and it's a terrible idea, but we love it.
We have a lot of earthquake putty
as
well. I think jiggers, shakers, Hawthorne strainer.
Yep, those are the basics.
If you're going to muddle, you need a muddler.
And muddle's just really the bartender's term for smash up.
A thing to just smash. I've used the backs of wooden spoons to do it if I don't have it. If I was making a mojito or something with strawberry in it, I would have a fine mesh strainer, because the Hawthorne strainer is going to hold back the ice, but it's not going to hold back the little bits. So I would pour it through, and that's called, for bartenders, it's called double straining, to get
1
out.
and 2.
That's the first. The second. That also is very helpful. What else?
One other question is about stocking a beginner's bar. What liquors would you recommend? We have a slightly contrary answer for this. I think that when some people start getting into bartending, there is a temptation to run out and buy one of everything. which can get really expensive and you might not use it. And so our suggestion is to find a classic cocktail or two that you know you like and kind of start investing there. If you know you like Manhattans, you might want to get a great rye and a great bourbon. Both are good Manhattans, so you can kind of figure out which one you prefer the taste of. And then a good sweet vermouth. If you're a margarita fan, you might want to invest in a great Blanco tequila, orange liqueur if that's your style, and get to know things from there.
We find that what happens is when people want to start their bar, they buy, as you said, one of everything, and it's all there. And then all of a sudden, you look at it and you don't know what to do because it's like, I have so many choices. There's too many choices. It's like being in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, and it's like, I don't know which sweet one I want. Whereas what Carey's saying is like, what is it that you like? Which is one of the focuses of our book. Is like, what do you like? That's why it's 25 classics that you've heard people call out for. And then let's go into that and figure out what we can do in that template of that drink. So if you like margaritas, go start tasting tequilas and start tasting orange liqueurs, because that's a whole world right there.
And if you decide your drink of choice is eggnog, we would start with a bourbon, a dark rum, and I love cognac. And
Yeah.
I mean, any aged brandy is delicious.
Thing to remember is all these cocktails that started here in America started with rum and cognac, because Louisiana was France. So
And that's where a lot of modern cocktail culture
that's where a
comes
lot
from.
of modern cocktail culture comes from. So a lot of drinks were originally cognac. Also, there was this World War in the teens, in the 19-teens, that happened in France, and so a lot of British soldiers drank a lot of cognac.
He's joking, by the way. He's a history buff. These are library patrons. They
sorry.
they probably know what you
Probably
speak.
know what I'm talking about. Excuse me. I've been drinking too much eggnog. I apologize.
All
Well, I
right.
think we're coming to the end of the questions. I don't see any more coming in, but what an informative presentation. And I want to remind everyone that Every Cocktail Has a Twist is available at Barrett Bookstore, your local independent bookstore, and I'm sure it's at every other big bookstore out there, and it makes a great holiday gift. So thank you for spending the evening with us. Maybe I'll go home and try and make that tonight.
I highly recommend you do.
Highly
You probably
recommend.
already know the ingredients.
Well, you're the best. Thanks so much and have a happy
Thanks so much,
happy
Carey.
holiday.
Happy
Bye,
holidays,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Thank you.